Welcome to the Bitcoin Zodiac, the podcast that explores the intersection of finance and astrology, where we use a combination of spirituality and logic to help us connect the dots in the markets. Hosted by Corinne Florence and Claire Marinan, who both come from a diverse background, bringing with them a wealth of knowledge and experience in the realms of astrology, cryptocurrency, trading, philosophy, investment strategy, and of course, Bitcoin. In each episode, we explore the economics of the markets following the evolution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies through each moon cycle and astrological transit. Join us on this journey as we explore the intersection of these two worlds that are often thought to be at odds with one another, finance and astrology. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor, a day trader, or just starting to dip your toes into the world of Bitcoin and blockchain, Bitcoin Zodiac is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, and come and expand your consciousness with us as we explore the world of the financial markets through an astrological lens.
Full moon in Scorpio, there's just been a lot of activity. So I feel like we're winding down from all that as we look towards May. And it's just been landing in my body from all that, all the changes.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot. I have to say, from the last episode that we recorded where I was like full exhaustion, I feel like I've had this like massive just now, like, I love the word that you just used, like this landing. Like it feels like I've just like landed from this whirlwind ride of tiredness. And also like I'm actually coming out of my personal like Saturn return. So that probably gives away my age, people, but I'm coming out of my Saturn return. So I feel like I'm coming out of these like 2 years of exhaustion and like transformation. And I feel a massive energy shift. So I'm looking forward to taking off again. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
But it's been a pleasure to witness the transformation. We
have it all recorded, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do. Go back to past episodes. You can track through Corinne's Saturn return.
Yes, use that to prepare for our next ones.
Absolutely. And even in the banking sector, I sort of spoke last episode, maybe the episode before, but we have had another bank close in America, another regional bank, this time called Republic First. Last year, there was one which was called First Republic. They're not the same. So yeah, continued consolidation of the US regional banking sector. I watched a guy break this down on YouTube. His name is George Gannon, so I'm not going to pretend that these are like my thoughts, but it was really interesting to sort of hear him talk about it because it was the exact sort of same things that have happened. You know, they're overexposed US treasuries, were really hurt by interest rates, and and so he really raised a couple of really good questions because we already had this a year ago. So you know, how come they didn't do anything about it in this last year? Like if they knew that they were exposed in a similar way, number one, why didn't they hedge? Number two, why didn't they take advantage of the discount window? And number three, why didn't they take advantage of the BTFP? Because that only closed on March 11th. And like he said in his video, they could have, you know, applied for that on March 10th. And they would have had this year-long window to pay that money back. So it does raise a few questions about what is going on. Like it definitely is a how do I say this without sounding like I should be wearing a tinfoil hat? But there's a definite purposeful consolidation of the banking sector. Let's just put it that way. So that was kind of interesting to see. I kind of felt that was coming, but anything you guys like noticed in particular since the full moon?
Since the full moon, I've definitely been in my bubble.
Yeah. I mean, it has been that time of integration, I think. We through a really like powerful astrological time, and I mean, I'm loving the Taurus vibes. You know, I love, love, love Aries. But like this last Aries season was intense, you know? And so
Mm.
now we're coming into this new moon in Taurus in Bitcoin's 10th house, which is, of course, all about government, politics, senior management. We're kind of like transitioning from this like dynamic energy of Aries. And so then like Taurus season just offers us this little like soothing and calm, like acting as like this grounding energy after this period of like chaos and adventure. And so really under the influence of Venus and like being an earth element as well, you know, Taurus really encourages us to slow down, embrace the simplicity, and focus on what's really important to us. And also relying on our own inner compass. And I feel like Taurus energy is really about experiencing the present moment fully and embracing like more stillness. And that just allows us to process these past experiences that we've just been through and really integrate. I think Andrew used the word integrate as well, the wisdom, you know, that life is just always presenting us with. And so it's really an ideal time for connecting with nature. Just, you know, get out there and put your feet in the grass, like barefoot in the grass, and you know, on the earth, connecting to the earth. And as we find that stillness, we'll also discover like much more clarity, simplicity, and this inner strength. And I really feel like making life less complicated and more intuitive, like that's really the focus. And I think it's interesting because we, you know, a lot of the signs, it's always like leading us to be intuitive, but you know, all of the signs are leading us home in their own flavor, you know. And so yeah, I think Taurus as well, it's really about value and self-reliance, and then just cultivating this confidence that that brings, you know, and fostering creativity and abundance. So like by embracing our truest self and our own self-reliance, expressing ourselves and our creativity without fear, we really then attract the resources that we need to continue our journey. And it kind of proves to us that when we can feel secure and valued within ourselves, we can, you know, really move forward and create our own abundance. So that's kind of like the personal side of this new moon vibes that I'm getting. What are you guys feeling?
Yes, certainly. Everything that you said specifically around the new moon in Taurus, and the energy that we're in right now with the sun in Taurus for the next month. So Taurus is about survival, and at its core, its evolutionary intention is to live with personal meaning, right? So it's very much about values. I value this life. I want to be here. I want to survive. But then after survival, it's like, what do I want to do? I want to sustain my physical existence. And so there's this instinct to be around. It's very different than Aries. Aries nature, which we just came out of, is very outwardly directed. It's more, I want this, I desire this, I'm looking for this. With Taurus, we're actually bringing it in. We're consolidating our resources. We're establishing a sense of continuity and security in a way that is relevant to our basic needs for survival. So the question within Taurus is always, what do I need in order to be most comfortable? And the idea around comfort is relevant because the survival mechanism means we're able to know what does pain feel like and what does pleasure feel like. So there's this gravitation towards what's pleasurable. And we, so it's a very tactile, very sensory experience. What do I value? What makes my life personally meaningful? And the consciousness of Taurus is always about going within. It's withdrawn inside of itself in order for the soul to know like what it needs. And from a Taurus point of view, home is Taurus. It's the place where you're protected from the elements, which is why, from a Taurian perspective, all homes are, in a sense, are a way of protecting the body from threat. And as you go deeper into that, there's a unique way in which the home is put together. So there's this feeling of like space and breath and spaciousness. And then it's a very sensual experience. So the consolidation of the resources and values, and it always rules money. There's like this teaching within Taurus of less is more, and doing more with less, you know. There's this subtler understanding that there's around our own values. So it's an exciting time because there's this time to like get in touch with what do we value? Why are we doing what we're doing? How does that serve us? Especially as we come out of this busy Aries season.
Yeah. I can say I've felt that a lot even in like my personal life. Like a lot of conversations, even just talking with people, have been a lot around money. I think that during Aries season maybe was a period of time that people splurged a little bit. It felt very like, oh, let me spend. And now it's very much like you said, okay, now let's consolidate resources. Yeah, Claire was like spending all the profits that we took. But now it's like, hold up, like reconsolidate your resources. And I'm kind of seeing that already in some of the price action that we're seeing with Bitcoin too. So that's very cool to see. But yeah, a lot of conversations around money, I think, which also were brought up with that full moon in Scorpio. Seeing as Taurus and Scorpio are that money axes. I mean, a lot of my life is talking about money, but it just was very heightened when people had a lot of reflections on their spending and savings and things. So
yeah, I also see similar price action. Like I kind of see the beginning of this month as being like a time of consolidation, or even maybe a little bit of retracement, maybe even a big retracement. I don't know. I'm not really seeing like any like super volatile moves. I think it's very like slow and steady. And then we kind of come into this more expansive energy, which we're going to talk about towards the end of the month. But, you know, with this new moon in the sign of Taurus, the focus, I think, like shifts to themes like associated with Taurus, like we said, value, stability, finance, and material resources. And it always like invites me to just kind of like reassess my own relationship with material resources or material things. So it's like, what do I love? Like, what do I lean into? What makes me feel good? Like, what tastes good? Like, all of the sensual things. So I kind of like love that vibe of Taurus. But in terms of like the markets, we have like, I think there is going to be like more of a focus on stability and security. You know, Taurus is an earth sign, is, you know, very about stability and material security and practicality. So it's generally seen as like a favorable time for setting intentions relating to long-term financial stability. So I think it's going to be a more conservative time. I think it leads towards caution and more of a preference for secure, stable investments versus speculative ventures. So this period may be just a time that investors focus more on long-term investments and like avoid like unnecessary risks. So again, focused on value. Taurus ruled by Venus, which governs money and value and love, of course. But in terms of financial astrology, it's more money value rather than like love of money, which some people interpret it that way. But this new moon might really bring a renewed focus on what truly holds value and the best way to increase or preserve value and wealth. So yeah, again, I think we've spoken about this before when we've spoken about Taurus, but it's like, yeah, like what do I value and where am I choosing to store it? So I think that that's kind of interesting. So I think, yeah, the markets are going to seek stability. There'll probably be a bit of less volatility around the beginning of this month, but also like a resistance. There's a bit of a resistance to rapid change with Taurus as well. So I think we could see some steadier markets and maybe like growth at slower rates. And also like a focus again on commodities and real assets, like things of the earth. So real estate, you know, property, commodities, keep an eye on gold and silver. And you know, these might become more attractive and more in the spotlight during this time. And also even Bitcoin, while it is digital, it's really viewed as a store of value and, you know, viewed as digital gold. So that also kind of aligns with the Taurus values. So I'd say that at the beginning of this month, we have more of a focus on Bitcoin and less of a focus on the alts. And, you know, as we move through this month, then that kind of shifts a little bit. So I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. One last point on that is that on the May 8th new moon, there's going to be about 5 planets in Taurus. The Venus, the moon, the sun, Uranus, Jupiter, all in the 10th house of Bitcoin, all within Bitcoin's public image of security. And so there might be like a rattling up in the news about what is secure, what is security. There might be some news of maybe, you know, whether it's ETF or whether it's sovereign countries or something is going to bring attention to Bitcoin as a store of value or as a sense of security. Between May 8th is just the new moon. It doesn't mean that it will happen on May 8th, but usually the new moon cycle lasts at least 2 weeks. So throughout May, we're going to continue to see a narrative of Bitcoin taking on some sort of mantle of security through that lens for the people.
Yeah, I see a lot of that. When I actually went through and looked at specifically the transits for Bitcoin on this new moon, of course, we have it happening in the 10th house. And like you mentioned, Claire, it does then really have these themes of government, politics, leadership, and public reputation. And I also had, like, you know, with Taurus creating this extra layer of stability, material concerns, and values to these themes. And the new moon, excuse me, with the new moon, how it can also like symbolize these new cycles, and it being in the 10th house could highlight changes in how Bitcoin is publicly perceived, perhaps shifting towards a more mature or mainstream acceptance within the financial systems, and how it might be related to these government bodies making more decisions around that. To go a little bit deeper, then I saw that the new moon is sextile the natal Uranus of Bitcoin during this time. And of course, we know that this is a harmonious aspect, but Uranus likes to bring in not just unexpected developments, but we could also see it as a bit more of like an innovation to these you know, whether they want to bring it into these conventional systems to what it is that we're already using, and whether they want to adopt that, or a lot of question marks and decision making around that. Obviously, I think here it could be, no matter where in the world, maybe surprising regulatory changes that, hopefully, seeing as this is a positive aspect, it could favor crypto or it could favor Bitcoin. So that's to see. And then the other positive or more favorable aspects that I'm seeing specifically on this new moon are the Venus trine the natal sun and Mercury trine the natal Neptune. So these could be favorable influences for Bitcoin in general, but more specifically the Venus trining natal sun could increase Bitcoin's appeal or desire, that people want to see more of it, both for existing and new potential investors. Like, this could be a very attractive time for new investors, especially if something regulatory is approved or Bitcoin just becomes more accepted. And then with Mercury trining that natal Neptune, that could help Bitcoin's messaging resonate more deeply with public and investors. You know, there might be more communications or announcements that could tap into that more, I always say, like the 5D side of Neptune, the more imaginative or the more inspirational qualities of Neptune. So that might be overall just attracting new people to it. And the more challenging ones is where I do see maybe, or this represents a bit more potential volatility, because Mars is square the natal Mars of Bitcoin during this time as well. So that can bring maybe tension, conflicts, and so less favorable influences. But more so, I just feel like a lot of volatility, or this is a really great thing, I think, also for us as investors to be careful of, because when we see something like this, maybe it could be that we're more aggressive because there are more sudden market moves, or some external economic factor disrupts crypto, and so we become more impulsive, or we have a tendency to become more impulsive ourselves during this time. So I think that's where we can definitely tap into that Taurus energy of just staying grounded and as stable as possible. And just the last thing that I will add there as well, because I think it fits in perfectly to what you just both said, is that Uranus remains square natal Neptune. So by this stage, we've seen Venus start to shift a few more degrees away from Uranus in Taurus, but it is Uranus is still there and square the natal Neptune of Bitcoin. And this could maybe bring more unexpected revelations during this time, that maybe challenge existing conceptions or misconceptions about Bitcoin. So this could bring a bit more confusion to investors, or realities that maybe don't when you have an expectation or a reality and it just like doesn't match what is actually happening. So a bit of that confusion is something that we could see. But yeah, that's kind of like overall the more like standout positives and the more standout negatives specifically for Bitcoin during this time that I see. So I don't think it's smooth sailing either. But hopefully, this is more of those opportunities for the long term and for the evolution of Bitcoin long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting, the 10th house, like there's so much 10th house action, obviously, this month. And so like government, politics, leadership, and, I am expecting more regulations to come for Bitcoin. I think when it was sort of, it's being dealt with as a commodity now. I think it's under I don't know the acronym, but the governing body that's it's the SEC's counterpart, but for commodities rather than securities. I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's CFTC or something like that. But I think that what's interesting about Bitcoin is obviously the way that Bitcoin functions itself cannot be regulated. It can't be changed. Bitcoin just does what it does. But the way that citizens interact with Bitcoin, those sorts of things can be regulated. And I think we are going to start to see some of that. I do expect, especially in the Western countries, USA, Europe, UK, Australia, Canada, for sure. I think we are going to see a lot of these sort of regulations in the same way that we see with gold, like limitations on personal holdings of Bitcoin. So it'll be interesting to see how that's policed, and it's going to take a while to filter those things through. And I sort of felt that those kind of regulations may not come in until we have really shifted over to more of a digital system. Like we still have a lot of cash in the system, but even here in Asia, there's a very concerted push for everything to be digital. Scan a QR code, pay for everything. It's very much like that. So I don't know if that feels that way in America, but I really felt like we would start to see those kind of regulations come when that was more of the focus or the way that we do things, because then obviously it's very easy to track. You're buying from a bank account, taking money from a bank account where you're KYC'd, transferring to an exchange where you're KYC'd, and then transferring your self-custodied Bitcoin that you've just bought to a wallet, So that's very easy, to be monitored, let's say. So I do think those kind of regulations will come in. Whether they will be enforced like this soon, I don't think so. But I think there will be some stirring around that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think we've still got a while before. And I love that you touched on Asia, because I have been speaking to some friends that live in India, and they're like, they've been trying to push like electronic payments here for the longest time, but let's be real, we all use cash. Like majority of the things that people use there is cash, and they're like, we're not budging.
Yeah, I mean, India has a huge cash economy, but I mean, even when I lived there, there was, I lived through demonetization, where they basically said in 3 days' time, or from now, really, like 1,000 rupee notes are no longer, legal tender, no longer valid currency. So that was a really interesting time. But there was definitely the push to be going digital and moving in that direction. And, here in Thailand as well, it's everything you can pay for with your QR code straight from your bank into that payment system. So definitely a push for that. There's some places that only accept digital, and that was since COVID, and it was sort of pushed through in that time period that it was like, we don't want to be handling cash, and they never went back to taking cash. But again, here, massive cash economy all throughout economies throughout Asia. So be interesting to see how successful that is, we shall see, I think. But I do feel that energy of governments sort of, we've moved into the ETFs, we've been accepted by Wall Street are in. But now I think even within the Bitcoin community, there's a lot of conversations, a little bit of a back and forth. Interestingly enough, it's, 10th house is also leadership, and a lot of sort of prominent people in the Bitcoin communities. There's sort of one camp that really is very happy for Bitcoin to remain just as a store of value. And then another camp that's like, no, it needs to become currency and continue forward on that path. So I think that's also part of that energy too. So quite interesting.
Yeah. There's still a lot of question marks, still a lot of people trying to understand which direction we're going to take this. How is this going to play out?
And I think it's funny because Bitcoin, like, it's always such a mind sort of confusion, or like to me, that because it's so backwards, like really, because we're so used to our world, everything is marketed to us, everything is like spin, and do you know what I'm saying? And it's so funny because Bitcoin has no centralized marketing department. Bitcoin doesn't have anyone making decisions like, we're going to go in this direction, or we need political backing from this direction, or these kind of things. Bitcoin just does what it does. And just by existing, it's this disruptive energy because it's giving an alternate option. And so it just, another block in 10 minutes time, another block in 10 minutes time. And it hasn't stopped doing that since 2009. So it's us that shifts, and it's us that changes. And I've always felt that mass adoption for Bitcoin comes through that way, like the changes in our current system, the changes in politics, the changes in world powers, those shifts and changes like lead people to think differently about Bitcoin as an option, and that's sort of what drives it forward. So yeah, I think we live in really fascinating times, and it's so fun to be a part of, I think.
Exactly. Fun is a great word.
Yeah, like a roller coaster fun. Like sometimes it's like white knuckling, and other times it's like, woo.
It is. It's all the adrenaline, dopamine just hits.
Yeah, it's that kind of fun. Should we speak of the dampener of fun? Should we chat about Saturn?
Oh.
Daddy's in the house. Daddy Saturn's in the house, laying down some rules.
I'm so sick of Saturn. Remember, Saturn return. I'm done. I'm done.
You've been really playing with Saturn the last few years. But Andrew, you had some stuff to talk about with Saturn, I think.
With Saturn, no, but with other planets, yes.
With other planets. Okay,
good. Let's just skip on over Saturn. Please
something
else.
I have one for Saturn. So we have a Saturn quincunx, which is also an in conjunct. So I'm not sure if I've spoken about this kind of aspect on the podcast before, But we have a Saturn quincunx with Bitcoin's natal Jupiter, and in the 8th house of waste, death, rebirth, and resources. So in financial astrology, this aspect, also known as an inconjunct, occurs when two planets are about 150 degrees apart. So this aspect is generally indicates like some tension and misalignment and required adjustments between the energies of the planets that are involved. So when you're considering Saturn quincunx with Bitcoin's natal Jupiter, we're looking at the interaction between the energies of restriction, like Saturn, and the expansion of Jupiter, and as they relate to Bitcoin. So Saturn is often, as we said, related to restriction, discipline, responsibility, all the things that Sagittarius like me hate. Long-term planning. We don't love this, but it tends to also bring structure, but can also impose limitations or challenges. So especially when Saturn is in Pisces, these themes get infused with this like Piscean qualities, which are like intuition, spirituality, compassion, like that dreamy kind of energy. Yeah, Saturn doesn't love that vibe. So it kind of feels uncomfortable in Pisces because its need for structure sort of conflicts with Pisces' fluid nature. And so this can lead to a period where the practical boundaries are really necessary to manage the like less tangible aspects of life. So I kind of see that reflected. We're already starting to see the Twitter and the YouTube of like Bitcoin to $1 million, and these kind of things. So I think it's like there's just this little call to be like, hang on a second, let's stay with like the here and now. Let's move forward one step at a time, and let's sort of let's have these. Let's lean into the tangible things that we know about Bitcoin and how it's moving. So in the context of a quincunx, we've got Saturn might highlight areas where there's overexpansion or like a lack of caution. So that really requires some adjustments or corrections. So we maybe will see a correction on around the 11th. We could see that. As we've already said, it's kind of a period of consolidation, nothing like too exciting to the upside yet. But you have Jupiter there on the other hand, that's always associated with growth and luck and expansion, and often considered to be really beneficial for financial gains and prosperity. But when in this challenging aspect, with Saturn, Jupiter's typically positive influence can be a bit tempered or maybe misdirected. So suggesting just a need for recalibration. So so I think we could, as I said, if we were going to see any kind of correction, I would expect it to be around that time. And again, Saturn is the daddy government ruler, setting those rules and regulations and teaching lessons. So we maybe again could see some regulatory and structural changes. Could see some regulatory bodies imposing stricter controls or structures like I was talking about before, and just affecting how maybe Bitcoin operates, more in terms of not operates functionally, but more how we operate and interact with it, or how it's traded. So maybe it may result in like some temporary pullbacks, and some adjustments in the market potentially.
Can I just hop in there too to quickly add, because I believe you just said that that's on the 11th of May. So we have the full moon 7th, 8th of May, 11th of May, what you just covered. And in between on the 9th of May, we have Mercury's greatest elongation. So we actually discussed this on, I believe it was episode 25 of the Bitcoin Zodiac. We went into detail and looked at some images of what is Mercury's greatest elongation. And we had that, the last time we had that was right around the end of March eclipse. So I believe it was the 24th of March. And now we're seeing it again on the May 9th. And what this is from a financial astrology perspective is it's a key date to keep an eye out on. Whether, I mean, we always keep an eye out on Mercury, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, right? But for the greatest elongation, it seems to be a time of like either key reversals, or we just see like quite a significant move occur around this time. I remember actually studying this when I started studying financial astrology from a stocks perspective, and they spoke about how this is a key aspect that institutions use to either significantly push the market in the continued direction that they would like to watch the market go to, or it's going to be their key reversal point. So interesting to see all those days align. And you're right, this could be that's definitely a key period of time I'm keeping an eye out on. I mean, I don't know about both of you, but I'm like, I'd love just a bit more of a pullback. So before alt season, we can just stack up a little more. Not from greed, but just, Yeah,
I mean, even like I think it was maybe last episode or the episode before, like even from a price action point of view, like I would really like to see that kind of like 50 to 60 area be, filled, be reclaimed. It just creates a little bit more stability in the market. So, maybe we'll see that. I'm not sure if we'll get down there, because every time like it just keeps getting bought back up. It like comes down to 60, bought back up, comes down to 60, bought back up. So we shall see. But if it was going to happen from a price action perspective, I'd love to see that. It's not do or die if we don't, but I would like to see that. And if it were to happen, I would say it's around this like first half of May that we're kind of looking at.
Yeah. I think momentum is starting to pick up. Also, two important planets changing signs. Mars goes into Aries from April 30th until June 6th. And historically, Mars in Aries has been the best Mars placement for Bitcoin. And so we'll likely see upward momentum, especially as the month plays out. And then Venus goes into Taurus, also in its own domicile. So that too is like a change up towards money and security. And so Mars and Venus ingressing new signs is definitely a bullish indication of upward momentum. So whatever's going on with the consolidation phase, it's not going to last. There's going to be buying pressure from an astrological perspective as the influences play out. Also, Venus, from a financial astrological perspective, and this is beyond Bitcoin, also in the financial markets, Venus conjunct Jupiter, which happens between May 20th, May 30th, is a historically very bullish for Bitcoin, but also always has an influence in financial markets of appreciation. So there's always an increase there. And then also what I'm seeing is in late May, there's an aspect between Venus, Jupiter, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, so that and Neptune, and it makes a minor grand trine to Bitcoin's natal Jupiter. And so that too is an indication of expansion and increase of value, of perceived value of what Bitcoin is worth. So all these different confluences and indications are pointing upwards. So whatever's unfolding, it's on its tail end as the momentum increases. And then going further into June is when we really see Pluto. We see the trine between Pluto and Uranus and Gemini, which is very much related to technology, crypto, AI, and entering the collective with far more intensity and far more interest. So there's this continuously like layered up happening as we go from May into June. So excited to see where it all plays out.
Yeah, it feels like this beginning of May is like just like sorting out these last little lessons, or those kind of things. It feels like a tying up of loose ends kind of thing. Like we even have Chiron square Bitcoin's natal Chiron in Aries on the 13th of May, again 10th house. So I feel like it's all to do with like government and regulations and, you know, those kind of things, like sorting those things out. So, you know, I love the energy. I won't say I love, that's probably the wrong thing to say, but I find the energy of Chiron really interesting, this wounded healer energy, because it's almost a space that's like our greatest challenges, our greatest difficulties, but it's also like our areas of greatest growth and like forward movement, I think, and healing. So yeah, it represents our deepest wounds, where we can heal them, key areas of vulnerability, learning, and eventual wisdom. So how we might help others with similar issues. So it significantly influences like personal growth, healing, and overcoming vulnerabilities. And in the context of financial astrology, particularly through, you know, its interaction with Bitcoin's natal Chiron, it's like we need to consider how these themes of healing and vulnerability play out in economic terms. So I think, like you were saying, Andrew, it feels like this first half of the month is really cleaning up these little wounds and these things that we need to sort of tidy up and heal and transcend before we can really move into this expansive phase. And yeah, so I think, as I said, Chiron, you know, highlights these vulnerabilities, you know, both in Bitcoin and also in economic structures or structures, you know, it shows us the potential for healing and resolving these issues. So it's not like Chiron, wounded healer, you're always going to be wounded in this area. It's always going to be bad for you. I think previous, like old school astrology used to look at that as a negative part of your chart, but it's actually like where the power comes from. It's like healing that is where the power comes from. And so this square aspect, you know, is a challenging interaction between these 2 points on this chart, and indicating tension, conflict, or obstacles that need to be overcome. And it suggests that the energies of the planets involved are in conflict, but requiring action to resolve. So Chiron and Aries specifically also deals with the concept of self and ego. So it can bring up issues related to identity, leadership, as we just talked about, assertiveness, and the initiation of new ventures. So for Bitcoin, which has, you know, this might reflect challenges related to its role as the pioneering cryptocurrency and the conflict it faces in establishing itself as a legitimate and lasting entity in the financial world. So as I'm even reading my own notes and saying that, it's bringing to mind that sort of conflict of like, how does Bitcoin now become currency? And obviously that faces new headwinds. Like the current financial system would really like to keep Bitcoin just as a store of value, and will do, you know, anything to sort of to never become currency. And so I kind of see that playing out with this aspect as well. But let's get into the more positive, juicy end of this month.
Oh, before we do,
I think this is actually another one.
I mean, no, it's still, I mean, I see this as positive. I just think that this really aligns with what we're talking about still, like really just talking about this 10th house and these themes, even before, like as we shift into a lot more positive future, which the, you know, stars are aligning for us 100%. But I think this is the great time to just slide on in and talking on, you know, leadership, governments within the crypto space. I think many of us, and I'm just going to share my screen. I just picked an article at random, but because I think like this is cool news for many people. And it's not even news. This is something that has been proposed. And whether this in particular is going to happen or not, I just think that this shows a really great way of where we're heading towards, and a lot of these 10th house themes that are a longer period of time for Bitcoin that I feel really represents than the rest of the cryptocurrency space. So and this is not by no means promoting any political party, because, you know, we already have enough of that drama happening in the US right now. But so this is just general news. But I thought it was really cool when I saw that RFK Jr. advocates for blockchain-based US budget to ensure transparency. So essentially, what has RFK Jr., which is one of the people who are running for the presidential election this year, or he's one of the candidates, he has proposed, imagine if one day soon, hopefully, I don't know why we're not implementing right now, I mean, maybe I do have an idea why, but if we had all of the taxes, for example, we go and we pay our tax and we get to see on the blockchain where the money is being spent. Isn't that such a simple proposal that you're like, wouldn't that just make the whole world so peaceful and happy? And there would just be such I believe, a reduction of, and I think part of it says it in here, a reduction of wasteful spending and corruption, dare we say that word. But it would make us so much, I know it would make me so much happier to pay taxes. Like, I understand the purpose of taxes. You want to pay because you want to contribute to everything that's going on in the space that you're living in or spending of the majority of the year in. But when you don't know where that money is going, you see the crazy spending problem that a country like America has. And you think so, and all the other issues that are coming up right now that have been loading up for years, and you're like, well, where has all that money gone?
Yeah. Really nice to see where the foreign aid is also spent on the transparent blockchain too.
Right, that part.
Yeah. Also, there's so much none of the largest government agencies in the US, for example, the Pentagon, it never has passed an audit. Nobody knows. There's trillions of dollars unaccounted for. No one knows where this money goes. So I think that when RFK's ideas are a sign of the collective starting to say, like, hey, where's our money going? And if we have technology to be able to track this, can we get it on? Will he be elected? I don't know. Will this, but the conversation around blockchain being a source of truth, and so that the public can go and verify and validate where are my tax dollars going? Because for the last few hundred years, governments have just been taxing us and then saying, well, we'll take care of it. We know where to spend it. But there's been no accountability, and that can change with the technology we have in our hands now.
Yeah. So lots of conversations around these themes. And yeah, like you said, Andrew, it's just a conversation starter. It's like this is just starting to open up the what ifs. And I do love that it's bringing more public attention to these issues that maybe the average person doesn't even think about as much. And now we're like, oh, wait, this is happening. Here's the problem. Here's a solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. How are you guys feeling about election season? I've kind of dialed out on purpose of the US news because it just kind of drives me crazy. I just look at House and Habit on Instagram. That's where I get my political discourse from. But how are you guys feeling about it? It doesn't feel, I mean, from an outsider, it doesn't feel as insane as I expected it to, but inside the country, does it feel as divided and as crazy as you thought it, would be? I mean, you're one blue state, one red state also, so it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. You go first, Andrew. How do you feel?
I don't know. I don't really, I don't feel much different from that, but I also don't get involved in any conversations around politics or just stay away from that. So I'm not really sure if I'm the best person to ask about it.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, this is my first like I'm still really new in this country, so I feel like I'm a fly on the wall, just observing. Like, I don't really get into much political talk. I do follow House and Habit also for just the entertainment. Like, that's my like little dose of drama, which I think is fun. But I don't see anything like extreme. There's obviously a lot of like controversial talks, and it's mainly on just social media. You know, even with this whole TikTok being banned, and there's a lot of question marks around the actual motives behind that.
Right.
So I think we see and probably experience very similar to what the rest of the world does if they're following online. Maybe in some place like Washington, it might be different, but I don't know. We're just here living a beach life in Florida, so
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people also, you know, it's the politicians that want the division, right? They're
Yes.
the ones that profit from the division. They're the ones that benefit from the division. Whereas I think the average person is like, you know what, maybe let's just not have these conversations that divide us so much. And I think that that's kind of like a beautiful way to move forward, instead of people being so angry. Yeah, and you're right. They tend to take to social media to get angry, but you know, don't read the comment section.
no.
Too funny.
All right. Well, I think now we can definitely talk a little bit more about the future and the positive aspects that are coming along.
Let's get into the positive aspects. Yeah, like I mean, the first one for me is really 18th of May. We have this Jupiter Cazimi in Taurus, again, 10th house. And so this represents a unique and potentially powerful influence on the financial markets, including the price of Bitcoin. This event is really characterized by Jupiter being in conjunction with the sun, specifically when Jupiter is within 17 minutes or less of the sun's exact position. So this amplifies its energies in a positive and potent way. Woohoo! We love that.
Let's go.
Good vibes. When a planet is in Cazimi, it means that it is in the heart of the sun or a very close conjunction, which is considered a position of great strength. The planet's qualities are not only fortified, but also favorably highlighted by the sun. So for Jupiter, the planet of growth, expansion, fortune, and luck, this suggests an intense spotlight on matters of wealth, abundance, and prosperity. So Jupiter in Taurus is a sign that emphasizes stability, as we said, material values, and practical pursuits. So it's associated with financial matters, assets, and possessions. And Jupiter's transit through Taurus generally indicates a time of potential growth in these areas, favoring long-term investments and substantial tangible returns. Also, the late degrees of any sign, so this one is 28 degrees, often suggest themes of culmination and the potential for critical decisions that result in significant changes or the reaping of what has been sown earlier in the cycle. So it's like this beginning of Taurus, all of this like lessons and, you know, restriction and accumulation phases, that's all been sown earlier in the cycle. And so it's time to reap that. So
Yes.
LFG Bitcoin, let's do it.
Rocket emoji.
Rocket emoji, exactly.
Which I don't think we're allowed to do anymore, by the way, because the SEC classes that as what is it? Like you're enticing people. So SEC, joke if you're listening. No financial advice, people.
I love that the SEC are even mentioning emojis. This is hilarious.
I know,
Right.
but Jupiter Sun conjunct yet?
No.
My bad.
We've spoken about the Sun conjunct May 12th, May 13th.
Oh,
which is
okay.
also, I feel like that one's going to be the turnaround. That's like already like Sun conjunct Uranus and Taurus. Whoa, like that's a spontaneous feeling of the shifting of tides of around Taurus matters, around money, around, and all this happening in Bitcoin's 10th house. So mid-month is when things start to like turn around with a stronger current, I think.
Yeah. Wow,
Although
there's so much astrology.
Uranus, we never know what's going to happen. You know, there's always a spontaneousness to it. Like look at the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, and like that just happened on last week. There's always an element of like, huh, What? It's not, even when you see it coming, you don't really see it coming. So there's always a surprise factor.
Yeah.
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 So
And I think there are things also like within the macro sort of markets that are really interesting again, like in terms of the 10th house, like kind of Bitcoin's 10th house energy. And I think all of the things that happen in the macro markets, almost push people into Bitcoin. And so that's sort of like how I view that when I see even, Bitcoin's 10th house. It's like, okay, all these movements in government are like kind of pushing people even towards Bitcoin, or these effects of Bitcoin. But we'll talk about that a little bit later, because there is something quite interesting happening too. But yeah, so I'm loving the vibe of the Cazimi. I love a good Cazimi.
Oh yeah. Yes. I love that energy. So uplifting. And what other astrology do we have that we may not have touched on yet?
I kind of see some volatility maybe on the 19th, but I think it's also fairly positive. We've got Mars conjunct the North Node in Aries again. Like, so we already spoke a little bit, but that's in Bitcoin's 9th house of foreign affairs. And so I think there is this focus, like, Mars again, as Andrew said, like representing this action, aggression, and drive. So it's really associated with how we assert ourselves, like how we take action, what drives us, and what drives our desires. So when it's in Aries, which Mars rules, as Andrew mentioned earlier, these qualities are just pronounced, emphasizing this bold, initiative, pioneering spirit. And so the North Node is really represents our karmic direction and what we need to do to evolve. So kind of points to these qualities that we should develop, challenges to embrace, the areas of life where growth is required. So this is all like very expansive, aggressive, go energy, So the conjunction, I do see some increased risk taking and initiative, like with that Mars energy. And so I think it's likely to infuse the markets with a surge of aggressive energy and boldness. So investors might be more willing to take risks. And I think, again, this is like more the feeling of like new people being interested in Bitcoin, taking that risk, starting to learn, starting to understand. So, but taking with that boldness that comes with just like, oh, wow, I just realized Bitcoin is more than number go up technology. There's more here. There's like that boldness and excitement and assertiveness that comes from taking that step into Bitcoin. So yeah, more willing to take risks, pursue new ventures, or jump into the markets with less hesitation. So again, focus on innovation. So I think this will like highlight new technologies, pioneering strategies within the financial sector. So even the kind of like macro elements of that, it's almost highlighting the oldness and the need for the new, like, let's step into something new. So I sort of feel that around that energy. But I think if there is any volatility, that this could be around that area as well. So I think that's also pretty cool.
Yeah, and I feel like, when we at the start of the episode covered a lot of those aspects that were happening specifically to Bitcoin, they're like being reconfirmed throughout these 2 weeks from that new moon, the new moon really igniting all of this stuff to happen. And then throughout, as we get these later aspects, it's just like confirmation, or like a deeper expression of that occurring. So yeah. I feel like these next 2 weeks will be with some volatility up and down. I don't know whether we're going to see a very clear direction yet.
No, I don't think the first couple of weeks of this month, I think that it's sort of like stifled. It's almost like that coiling, that pent up kind of tension is building. And then I think we'll see some expansion towards the end of the month as well.
And I feel like that's a really great point to also say that, you know, and maybe if there are like new listeners that haven't heard this yet, we love to say that absolutely astrology creates such a beautiful picture for us. But I think especially during these times where there are a lot of uncertainties, where there may be a lot of volatility, you know, we've got a lot of Uranus happening here. So like Andrew was saying, just potentially a lot of surprises. These are just a really great time to go back to your technicals and really be using your technical analysis during this time. That's how I feel I will be approaching this period of time, just really looking, and probably at smaller time frames, to just take it day by day and see what things are looking like.
Yeah. Astrology, technical analysis.
The perfect mix.
Yeah.
The perfect mix. Yeah.
Absolutely. Should we talk about the Venus-Jupiter conjunction? Corinne, did you have something to say about that, or should I go ahead?
No, you can go ahead on that one. Absolutely.
Cool. So again, Taurus, 10th house. So I mean, I just love some Venus, you know, because Venus really governs love and beauty and art and finances. One of my favorite things in the world, actually. And, and it's also closely linked to wealth and luxury and what we value materially and emotionally. So Venus in Taurus is just like so juicy, I think. Amplifies its focus on financial security, luxury goods, and material possessions. And again, as I've said in previous episodes, with Taurus, we're really looking much more about quality and much less about flashy, showy kind of things. It's much more about grounded luxury quality. It's really got that energy. So again, Jupiter, planet of expansion, luck, optimism, influencing growth and abundance and prosperity in Taurus, seeks to expand like tangible assets and enhance financial security. So conjunction is, you know, when we see the two planets align at the same degree with this in the same sign, so blending and amplifying their energies. And this is a beautiful conjunction, in my opinion. Venus conjunct Jupiter is traditionally seen as a very lucky aspect, especially favorable for financial endeavors. And again, it's at the 29th degree, so of Taurus. And so this suggests like it's a critical point of culmination and transition in financial matters, really emphasizing the need to solidify gains and prepare for subsequent changes. So it's really, I think we're going to see some bullish sentiment in the markets. It really indicates a period of optimism, confidence in the markets, and investors may feel more inclined to invest in luxury goods, real estate, and other sort of Taurus related sectors, gold. And as we said before, like Bitcoin is sort of extension of that, like digital gold. So this positive sentiment can definitely spill over into the cryptocurrency market and potentially boosting Bitcoin and crypto's price as investors look for alternative assets. And you know, I can see increased investment and spending during this time. The expansive influence of Jupiter combined with Venus can lead to increased spending and investment in particularly things like art, luxury items, and even technology. So for Bitcoin, this really could mean greater adoption and investment from both institutional and retail investors, and really attracted by its perceived stability and growth potential. So yeah, I see this as a growth time. Venus and Jupiter in Taurus, stability, growth in financial markets. I don't see anything other than that during that period. And we might witness like steady growth. I expect the stock market also to be, you know, I think that this is really starting the cycle of this like assets go up kind of move, especially in, as I said, in these sectors that are ruled by Taurus, you know, mining, agriculture, real estate, gold, and of course, Bitcoin.
Yeah, the tech sector. The tech sector as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not huge into stocks, but I am definitely looking more and more into stocks that are tech related.
AI.
Really see this. Yeah, AI. And I mean, of course, that is also with crypto. looking at those cryptocurrencies that do have AI integrated into them. But there's so much happening. I'm also thinking that we might put in the podcast notes or somewhere for everybody, like a line or a list of all of these aspects that are happening between this new moon to full moon, because there is a lot happening, just to create more clarity for you guys, because it's really with this Jupiter, Uranus, Sun, Venus all happening through Taurus that continue to just intertwine with each other and creating lots of positive aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And,
should we
should we talk a little about May 23rd and some other things that are happening around there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So maybe I'll just touch on what's happening in the crypto world. And I know Andrew pointed out some things that he may have noticed happening on May 23rd as well. So May 23rd is a very important date in the crypto space, because that is going to be the final deadline for the first wave of applications for the Ethereum spot ETF. So seeing as Bitcoin's ETF was approved on that final deadline, which was January 10th of 2024, I know a lot of us are awaiting that deadline, and that's creating, I don't think we've seen it yet. Maybe as of the release of this episode, we're going to see it a little bit more as of the 28th of April. When we're recording this, on ETH BTC, I saw a little bit of a break of structure there. So where I feel like Ethereum's time to shine is about to approach. And so that's definitely something that I would keep an eye out on. And Andrew, you noticed some things on Ethereum's astrology there?
Yeah, on around May 23rd, Ethereum has a whole lot of planets in the seventh house. So the Sun and Venus in Gemini in the seventh house, indicating partnerships and attraction as it relates to communication and contracts or something of that nature. It's very auspicious. And then Jupiter and Uranus are also there hanging out. Jupiter's just at that point, like at the tail end of Taurus, about to go into 0 degrees Gemini, but all happening in the seventh house, also expanding this whole conversation around ETFs. So it does look really good. But at the same time that's happening, Mars and Chiron are on the natal Ethereum's Uranus. So there is some sort of maybe surprise element that might come into play around all this, which might affect Ethereum's actual architecture or gamify tokenomics, or something will move around that, because the fifth house rules the game theory of Ethereum and what makes it tick and what makes it work. But again, Mars is in Aries, which has also been historically pretty good for Ethereum. So, and Mars makes a trine to Ethereum's Ethereum has a lot of planets in Leo in the ninth house. So it does look overall bullish for them with whatever's going to play out.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation as well with the Ethereum ETF. Because, when we had the Bitcoin ETF, there were so many people that were like, oh, these, big investment firms are going to hold so much of the supply of Bitcoin and it's dangerous. It's not, it's not great. But the interesting thing is that we haven't really had those conversations when it comes to Ethereum, whereas actually Ethereum is proof of stake. And so if they're holding a large portion of the supply of Bitcoin doesn't necessarily give you more say in the kind of function of Bitcoin, but it does allow you a little control over price action, of course, but it not in the same way that when you're proof of stake, whoever those really big holders of Ethereum are, they actually do have more say in the way that Ethereum is run and in governance votes and things like that. So it will be sort of interesting to see how that shows up. And when you were saying that, Andrew, about like there could be something that changes the way that that works, that was what immediately kind of came to mind, is that we're going to see with the launches of these ETFs, we're going to see people, like not people, but institutions hold a large chunk of that supply of Ethereum.
Yeah. When it happens, because if with the Mars over the Uranus part of it, let's say they get denied for the ETF, then it might go back to like, well, what do we need to do to get into an ETF? They might need to make some sort of structural change with this fifth house action. So
interesting.
There's definitely some push and pull. And also all these planets happening in the seventh house, even though it's the house of partnership and the house of, getting together with others, it opposes the natal, the ascendant, which in Ethereum's case is Scorpio. And so there is this push and pull energy with Ethereum also having Saturn and right so close to the ascendant in Scorpio. There is something with like Jupiter at that point opposing its natal Saturn. So there is something where it's like overexpansion, trying to make a relationship. Maybe it's not the right time, but it's like a touch point in the conversation. So it might just like stretch, elongate to where it can go. It might get denied. And then like the next turnaround, it might just like actually push through. So there is something with like a deepening happening though at that time.
Very interesting. Yeah, interested to see how that plays out. If I remember correctly, the seventh house was, and I mean, this is obviously a different scenario. I believe the eclipse that took FTX down occurred in the seventh house, and the seventh house likes to bring up some scandals too. So that'll be fun to watch how that plays out. I can't see it playing out exactly the same as what happened with Bitcoin, like with the Bitcoin ETF. I feel like that would just be too, and we should also specify here we're talking about the US here, because it's already been approved. The Ethereum spot ETF was approved in Hong Kong. I think they actually start trading officially as of the 30th of April, so in Hong Kong. So that'll be interesting to see also how that plays out.
Very interesting. And as Corinne was talking about last episode, we generally see the flow of money come into Bitcoin and then flow into Ethereum and then flow into the rest of the alts. So it will be interesting to see if this is sort of that trigger point to get some more interest into the rest of crypto, which will be very interesting, because I sort of personally view Bitcoin is one thing, and the rest of Ethereum and the rest of crypto is something quite different, and two very different plays, in my opinion. And so it'll be interesting to have some more interest, at least, and some more visibility for that side of crypto as well.
Yeah, because if we do look at the macro cycles that we've had so far, we're still in phase one. Like Bitcoin has been the main phase, but then we had a small cycle within the cycle where we saw the flow into Ethereum, altcoins, the meme coins, and that's very much finishing off and going to come back into Bitcoin. But overall, I do agree the bigger cycle that we're seeing, we're still in that Bitcoin phase. So it will be interesting to see, is this going to start the push of that? Because altcoins haven't done anything yet.
Not like they usually do, really.
Yeah, not really anything yet. And there's also been such a crazy wild pullback with altcoins. I do think though in June, with Pluto trining the Uranus and going into Gemini, I think we're going to see a large focus coming back into crypto with altcoins, specifically around AI in the second half of this year. So things are just pulling back, consolidating. We're going to see a further push into decentralization conversations, as well as anything to do with AI. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Like anything can trigger it. Like OpenAI can come out with some other ChatGPT function or some other, like anything can trigger and be a catalyst for it, and then be a conversation starter within the collective. And then so be curious to watch how that plays out.
100%.
I know another sort of thing that I'm really sort of keeping an eye on again that we spoke about in our very, very early episodes really was, and we haven't really spoken about it too much since, because the interest rates have kind of just been continually going up or staying still. But there's a lot of different things happening, you know, in the FX markets at the moment and things like that. So we really are looking like it's very interesting. Like the US dollar is actually in a very interesting sort of juncture at the moment. And it is a place that eventually every global reserve currency finds itself. And it's actually called the Triffin paradox, or the Triffin dilemma. And basically it's named after the economist Robert Triffin. And he highlights the fundamental dilemma in international finance that's faced by countries who serve as the global reserve currency. So at the moment, obviously, that's the US dollar. And basically what it is that he argued that when a national currency also serves as a global reserve currency, there are conflicting interests and conflicting needs between the domestic monetary policy and the international monetary policy and international monetary demand. And so it really is quite an interesting time to see how, like, I don't really want to be Jerome Powell or the Fed at this point in time, because it's really is a no-win situation for them, no matter which way they go with it, because at this point in time, the US dollar within America, at home, is losing purchasing power against goods and services, whereas it's completely annihilating every other currency outside. So it is quite an interesting time, because realistically, domestic monetary policy would lean towards keeping those interest rates quite high at this high level, and really sort of dampening down internal inflation. But the rest of the world really needs them to start reducing rates and introducing more liquidity into the markets, especially places like Japan. We've seen in the last 18 months, Japan has lost 40% in 18 months. It's absolutely insane. But it's very, very interesting. It's a very, very interesting time. And so really, like, countries like this, like Europe desperately needs them to reduce rates, Australia, the UK as well. But obviously, if they begin to do that, this will possibly trigger massive inflation at home. So it's really a balancing act for the Fed. There's no real great answer for them. But you know, it then intertwines even further, because Japan is also the largest holder of US treasuries in the world. And so, you know, it's also not good for the US for them to be in a position where they would need to stop buying them or start selling them. So it will be really, really interesting. I personally would be very, very surprised if they do not start reducing the interest rates by mid this year, by June, July this year. I'll be really surprised to see that, but you know, we don't know where this is going. We don't know if it's the goal to actually kind of annihilate all these other currencies. That may be, you know, what is leading into you know, consolidating currencies in the same way that we're seeing consolidation in the US banking sector. We may start to see currencies consolidate and fold into each other as well. You know, as I spoke about one of the previous episodes, that's where the BIS is envisioning we're heading, that we're folding all of the currencies into one global reserve currency that they control. As I said in that episode, I do think that's a very extreme and unlikely perspective anytime soon, but it's sort of quite interesting to see the decisions that the Fed may make. You know, are they going to support the international demand for dollars, or are they going to, you know, try and continue to control inflation at home? So that's sort of the dilemma, and we'll see how that plays out. I think it's quite unlikely that that we that I think they will start pivoting and start to reduce rates by mid this year. And I think that we actually did speak about that in one of our early episodes, and kind of indicated like June, July would be the time that we would expect to see the Fed pivot. So yeah, we shall see.
I'm just taking a quick look at the CME Fed Watch tool, which they have changed, which has been interesting. But yeah, it's looking like the probability of them starting to reduce was earlier this year, but now it's shifted more towards July to like September, really, is when they may be looking to.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't see as late as
constantly changing.
September. Yeah, I'm not sure I see as late as September, unless the goal is to send the Japanese yen to zero. But I don't think that is the goal. But yeah, it'll be quite interesting. And I think in our early episodes, we actually spoke about July being the time that we were sort of seeing Fed pivot. So it's really fascinating to see that we're now in that time, and we're moving into that. And so we know what, we see 2024 as a time of expansion. Obviously, it's not, straight up and to the right, and that's it. There are periods of consolidation, there are pullbacks and everything like that. But overall, we see it as an expansive year. And we've said that since the beginning of this podcast, actually. And so I do see at some point the Fed pivoting, much more liquidity coming into the market, and assets in general, not just Bitcoin, not just crypto, but property, real estate, those sorts of, risk on, again, stock market, NASDAQ, risk on assets really going through the roof. But the thing with that is that then we have a problem with inflation within the US. And and then I feel that the mean reversion for those assets, probably looking around 2026, end of 2025, 2026, is really going to be quite brutal. So just to kind of like give some perspective on where I think we're going with that, I don't feel like we're starting a new 10-year up only business cycle. I think that it will be quite tight, and it will be quite volatile to the upside, but I think it will be quite short-lived also. So just to keep that in mind.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a lot to talk on here, even when we look at the astrology. I think definitely on a future episode, we'll need to talk a little bit about Neptune and where Neptune's headed and what that may mean for inflation starting from 2025, but thank you, astrology, for always giving us a clearer picture in advance.
Giving us a heads up. And I think that that's what the most beautiful thing is about astrology. Like, I was having a conversation with someone this week, and they were like, but it's like but you can predict the future. And again, I was like, no, that's just not how I view astrology. Like, I really view astrology like it's just actually surrendering and acknowledging that there are powers greater than us. And I view it more in alignment, like the seasons. Like, I don't wear a bikini in the snow for a reason, because I surrender to that is greater than me, and I surrender to the season, and I don't try and fight against it and impose my will and my desires on it. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to view astrology as well. It's like, what season are we in? How can I align to that, rather than me just wanting to like do my own thing and have my own way and be just constantly battling those energies. So I think that that's the way I view astrology anyway.
Yeah, same. Live within the cosmic weather. It's the best way of flowing with the current.
Yeah.
Not against. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we said this last episode, or even the one prior to this, but surrender has been a reoccurring theme that continues to come up, especially this eclipse season.
For life.
Yeah, just when you just go with the flow, and I know that's such an overused term, but literally when you just go with the flow, you just surrender to it, life becomes a lot more fun. Life gets a lot more bullish when you surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Guys, thank you
Well,
for a
on that
lovely
note,
episode.
thank you
And
both.
we will catch you. Have a wonderful new moon and set some beautiful intentions and enjoy this season. Peace, love, and Bitcoin.
Peace, love,
Peace, love, and Bitcoin. Happy new moon.
happy new moon.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bitcoin Zodiac podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussions about the evolution of Bitcoin viewed through the lens of financial astrology. This podcast does not offer financial advice, so please make sure you do your own research. And stay tuned for our next episode where we will continue to dive deeper and build off these perception-expanding topics. Remember, whatever your beliefs may be, we all have something to learn from each other, so stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep exploring the world of Bitcoin and astrology. As always, may the stars align in your favor and your crypto investments prosper. Until next time, peace, love, and Bitcoin.